Hello and welcome. My name is Paweł Piwosz and you are listening to Last Week in IT, the weekly podcast. Together with my fantastic co-hosts Jakub Siwiecki and Jan Mazurek, we'll give you our perspectives on recent news, events, announcements and many more. And we do it in our own style. Join us and enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to our small anniversary because today we are having the 10th episode of our Last Week in IT podcast. I can't believe that it's already been so many weeks that we've been talking to you from here. But today we have an actually interesting topic for me because when last time we talked a bit about the creativity, there was a quote that I've mentioned that working in the IT world is no longer like working in the factory, and it's not a work from 9 to 7 because we never know when we will have this creativity coming to us, and we should not necessarily force it. We can practice that, but we should not be forced to be creative. And that's why I would like to talk to you today about the aspect of time management, because there's a lot of trainings and a lot of materials where you can read about actually how to better manage the time, how to be better efficient. And actually, as a physicist, I think that we cannot manage time because time is will still continue to flow and still continue to pass. And even if there will be the end of the world, time will still continue to march on.
Okay, but
However,
what about time traveling?
well, if we would have time traveling, then I guess we would already have the time travelers from the future, right?
Potentially, but it sounds that you can manage the time then, because you can travel, so it means that you can manage somehow.
In the IT world for now, for our today's episode, I would like to focus more about the aspect of self-management rather than time management, because in general, I don't believe that you can manage time. You can only manage your time efficiently, the time that you have been given. You need to practice the self management to use this time most efficiently and most effectively. But I would like to get to know your opinion about the aspect of the time management. What do you think? Whether it's possible, whether it's useful, whether the work in the IT environment helps with the time management, or whether it distracts us.
Sorry, but I don't have time to discuss this. Of course, I'm kidding. I think that this topic is very, very much connected with creativity, about which we talked last time. Because in order to be creative, you need to have time, right? There is so famous, I think, comic strip with, probably you know this, with two guys who are trying to push some ladder, some box with stones, having square wheels, and someone just came to them with the proper, like a circle wheels, right? And they said to him, sorry, we don't have time, we are busy, right? In order to be creative, in order to accept creativity, innovations, you need to have time. Another thing which you mentioned about this, that we cannot manage time, I had in mind immediately the quote from, I am Star Trek fan, so I have a lot of quotes to things which we discuss. And there was, in the first episode of Deep Space Nine, there was quite interesting discussion between Captain Benjamin Sisko and Wormhole aliens. There was a question about the time because those aliens were living, let's say, outside the time. They didn't understand the concept of it. And he said something like that my species, the humans, we lives in the one point of linear time. Once we moved beyond that point, it becomes the past. So yeah, we cannot manage this, right? Because we cannot come back to it or stop or whatever, right? So this is very important aspect here. And what we can do, I think, is to be aware of that we cannot do anything.
Well, time is quite complicated topic, not only about time traveling, because, for instance, different cultures they perceive time differently. What means, for instance, past, present, and future? There are some studies about this, but this is like completely like a quite huge topic. So referring to what you mentioned, Jan, I came from environment of training, self development, and so on, and I noticed this switch in trainings about time management. I think about like 7 years ago. So before that, each training was about time management, and then it started evolving or changing into managing yourself in time. But I
Yeah,
still
that's true.
like I completely agree with this. But as I notice, very often still the emphasis, the gravity point in such trainings is on techniques. Techniques are extremely helpful, extremely good, especially about boxing the time. For instance, Pomodoro technique. I use it by myself. It's great. Of course, as much as possible, in my own on my own rules as well, my own terms. But very often we forget about us in this process. That it is managing ourselves, but people very often, I don't know why, they perceive it through techniques. So I manage myself through techniques. Fine. I think here what is needed is to change the again this gravity point, this the main point of change into us. What is happening with our brain, with our mind, with our energy, with our power? Because what we have, this is something that we have. We have our attention, we have our energy, we have like other elements that are strictly connected and flowing from us through each second, through each minute. So it doesn't matter which technique you will grab if you don't have the proper power and fuel in your body, then it won't work. So I think this is awareness of yourself and building the best of yourself in terms of like hours, sleeping schedule, and so on and so on. This is something that can help a lot.
Well, that's true, and I think in general it is really important to realize that one professor from the university told me an interesting quote. If you are complaining about not having enough time throughout the day, then find for yourself more activities. And that's kind of like sticked in my head because
Mm.
what he meant by that was only when you will have a lot of activities on your to-do list every single day, you will realize how precious the time is and how challenging it might be to find time for all of the activities. And you will then feel that you are not wasting your time, like, coming back from work, sitting on the sofa, Netflix for 5 hours, go to sleep. And then, every day passes like crazy. And my math teacher at the high school, she told me that up to the age of 25, 26, the days seemed quite long. And then almost like, immediately before she realized that she was already almost 50. And it's because a lot of the days look the same way. And I think a funny experiment for each and every one of us to try to go somewhere for the very first time. The road there is taking longer than the road back, just because our brain is trying
Yes.
to memorize many new activities, many new surroundings, many new inputs. Right? So it's a funny perception of the time, despite the fact we are walking the same distance. Okay, unless of course one way we are constantly walking up the hill, and the other way we are walking down the hill. So that also can increase our speed and the time. But in general, that's a funny uh, perception of time.
Yeah, and we can also say that time is relative, right? So if you do something
If
interesting,
you're standing
time
in front of
passes definitely
the
faster.
toilet, waiting in the line to get
Yeah.
inside, the time flies very slowly.
Yes.
But if you are already inside,
Yeah. In that case, the first case, the time is almost, not moving at all. I think that the point which I mentioned on the beginning, that we need time for the creativity, is also very important, right? Because uh, I don't know what is your perception of it, but what I see in many teams, IT teams, development teams, they work in under the condition of not enough people, not enough time to do things.
but I
How we
think
can deal
the
with that?
perception of because of that is because the perception of the business or those business trainings is like time equals money. right? Where I think my personal approach is time doesn't equal money, time equals everything. And that's like the biggest currency that we have, because no one will give you back the time that you invest into doing something, right? So that's why it's very important to make sure you use again that time efficiency, because it was Miles Davis, the jazz musician, said that time isn't the main thing. He said it's the only thing, and I kind of agree with that approach.
Well, so let me be a devil's advocate here, and I don't want to go into the philosophical discussion because I can be beaten very easily with that. If we have no
Mm-hmm.
influence on time,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't, is the time really equal anything then? How you can measure or equalize something what you have
So,
impact
so that's
on
that's what Kuba said. That
and
it's
not?
about your management or managing yourself in the time that you have given. Because
Mm,
as a you know physical phenomenon, time cannot be managed as such. However, what I like to say when it comes to this work in the, and I think kind of pandemic helped us with it slightly. Out of all of the bad things that it caused, there was a couple of good things, because it gave us that flexibility that we can, work remotely. And sometimes I remember some months ago, I went to the swimming pool. I came back 10 in the evening on a Sunday night almost, and I had a brilliant idea. I had like an epiphany that I suddenly knew how to solve a problem I was tackling throughout the entire week. So I just, sit down, wrote everything I needed to write, draw the wireframes, create a couple of diagrams, because I was in the zone and I felt that this creative juice were, flying through me. And I think that's the beauty of our work, our industry that we have. If you are working, for example, as an actor or actress in the theater, you don't have that possibility. Like, you need to be on the stage exactly at a certain moment. Although that's kind of recreating the play
yeah,
rather than creating something from scratch.
But
But
when you have a then
but hey, didn't we just agree that the toilet is the temple of ideas? So why swimming pool? But no matter. So let's stop here because we can go too far. The thing which you mentioned that we should be able to manage ourselves, and you also mentioned pandemic, and I think that pandemic showed us the importance of this self-management because when you go to the office, then you go coming back to home. It is clear boundary between work, or most more or less clear boundary between work and your private life. If you are at home and like me, I'm just switching the laptops or computers after work to my private one without moving myself from the desk, right? It is definitely harder. I think we become more and more aware
I believe that it
of it.
even forced us and pushed us to this situation when everyone probably who started working in remote environment needed to figure out how to do this. And I heard so many stories from people who were saying it's not helping. It's like first, of course, great, yeah, yeah, but then like it's like I'm working many more hours. I don't know. I don't take breaks because I still have a feeling that I'm at like at the office, but remotely at home.
Mm,
And I remember my friend many years ago before pandemic. He had an office 200 kilometers, I think, from his home and his region. So it was pointless for him to visit the office so often. So he was working from home, of course, and he hated this up till the moment when he created a space. But he had a flat where he had this possibility to create a space where he had everything when it comes to the office, like like papers, some board, and so on, so on. Coffee machine,
coffee machine.
colleagues from the office. Yeah, no joking. It was like extreme
It's president of the
reception,
cartoon,
the
right?
guard. No, it was very like tiny place, but when he was entering this place, it was a clear signal for his wife, for him as well, for his brain, that this is the place where you work. When you get out, it's not your office. So it helped him for this. For in this way, it helped him. So I think
Mm.
probably everyone needed to create such, even mentally, not in the flat, but mentally. This is my way. I don't know. I take the coffee, I sit down, and this is my way how to start work. And I know when to say stop. And I believe that many of us either found some way, some skill to manage ourselves in such environment, us in such environment, or figure out that this is not for them, for us. And they decided to visit office, or maybe buy some new flat, or go to the basement if it's possible, and to create and rearrange this in this way.
And you know that this is very interesting because where we are in the office, our, well, let me say that time in the office is managed not only by us but by our colleagues as well, right? We go to coffee, they come to us asking things, asking us to go to take coffee, etc., etc. Where we are at home, nothing like that happens. This is even kind of unconscious way of managing your focus, which
Okay,
is
but
very
still you
important with this
receive some
self-management, right?
messages. I'm not even referring to emails.
Yes, that's true, but you know, in with the computer systems, you can just mute those messages, those notifications, and work without it or beyond this. Let's say, right, when someone come to your desk, you
Well,
cannot
you
just
can
switch
wear
it
some
him
T-shirt
off.
like "Please don't disturb" or something like some signs in the office.
Try with me,
There is actually a
basically.
funny
Try with
gadget
me.
called the Busy Light. I don't know whether you saw it, but it's like a small LED lamp that you can attach to your screen that integrates with your Teams or Skype or whatever status. If you are busy in Teams, it shows the red light, so people know that they should not walk up to you and you should not be disturbed. Like if you're away from the computer, it shines in the yellow light, and if you're available, it shines in green. So it's kind of like a nice small indicator in the office that can help you really focus on the time.
Still, you can always.
Interesting. I don't believe
Yeah, I
it
can just
indeed, but
imagine like Pavel
but
coming
interesting
and
approach.
just like, I see that you're busy, but but it's like
Yes, exactly. Or are you
Yeah,
busy?
but in general, I think this is really something that we need to put a lot of emphasis to and realize that time as such cannot be managed, but there is a lot of interesting techniques and a lot of interesting ways of how we can manage ourselves and how we can get ourselves better organized. Because being in the
Yes.
age of distraction, there is inputs from so many areas, and especially when you have the smartphone receiving notification every few seconds, with the smartwatch also vibrating every few minutes or so. It's really might be tricky, might be challenging to stay focused on the task that you have at hand. So
Yeah, coming message on the any chat, right? And things like that. And then you are looking for solution on Stack Overflow. And oh, this is
and
interesting,
instead of
right? And
like, I remember studying for the exam at the
it happened.
university, and just I will quickly check my email, and then I find myself 2 hours later watching videos about pandas, right? So it's really easy to be distracted, and I think it's very
Yeah,
important for us to really be focused and be really better organized so that we will avoid the distractions at any time. And I think, like, if I would ask you, Kuba, you've mentioned Pomodoro technique that you are using, but which of the time management techniques that you use you like the most?
it's a question to me.
Yeah,
Well, I mentioned Pomodoro technique, and it's great because more and more we discuss this topic about managing ourselves. I would say it's just managing our attention. It's always a question about attention. When you mention about messages and so on, it's only about our attention. So Pomodoro technique can help a lot. It's not solving because you can still daydreaming and just like after 3 hours, like it was so not creative process for me because I was thinking about this and that and that. So I think it's not a technique, but I think I just noticed that I this is something that I combined with Pomodoro technique, practicing my attention. So practicing that, if I this is normal that you daydream. It's like you space out. It's normal. But I have a place where I just dropping down those thoughts and just like living and saying, okay, this is for next after next hour or after next block. And this helps me to survive and to focus on the task that I want to invest my time and my attention into. So I don't know any name for such technique, but definitely Pomodoro changed my way of thinking.
Pavel, what about yourself?
Yeah, this is very interesting because here I can to be an opposite camp. What doesn't work for me, and surprise, surprise, it's Pomodoro technique. I was never able to make myself compatible with this technique. But what you mentioned with this awareness, with this working constantly on being aware of what you do, where you are, and what you want to, let's call it this way, what you want to do next is very, very important. And again, probably there is no name for this. I like to do some checklists, some to-do lists, etc., 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 and this is the most effective, I think, for me personally. However, what I want to say on the end here, on the end of the sentence, is that there is no technique which works for every person, right? It's
An
very
individual.
personal.
And
Like,
if,
I
and
yes,
believe
if,
there is one
you need to
technique that
try.
always
And
works, like breathing. This is like definitely.
it's a quite useful technique, breathing, and the breathing itself is quite useful as long as you want to stay alive, I think, at least.
and I
And
think in
yeah,
general, one of the
that's
techniques
true.
that I would like to mention at the end of our episode today is one that is quite often overlooked, but I think it's very useful and very important that we all should take into consideration, and that's assertiveness. So don't take on our plate too many
Mm,
things that already exceeds our capabilities or exceeds our capacity just because we are polite and just because we want to help others, because there is this quote from Terry Pratchett that the reward for toil is always more toil, and if you dig the best trenches, the only reward you will get is a bigger shovel. And I think sometimes putting this healthy boundaries on what you can do and what you cannot do, and respecting your time to avoid professional burnout, to avoid exhaustion, to avoid taking way too many things on your plate is a good thing that I guess we all should keep in mind, and we should care about this.
this is this
So let's
assertiveness. All
assertively
right, that's good. Thank
say
you for
yes.
end this episode and save rest of the time,
And on
right?
that, let me thank you for listening to our anniversary episode of Last Week in IT podcast. Give us a note whether you liked it, whether you agree with our thoughts on the time management. Leave a comment, and I hope to or
Maybe you
work
have
works for
What
you.
completely
technique works for you?
yes, indeed. Maybe you have completely something new that we did not mention when it comes to techniques or approach, a framework, not to CICD, but to time management or
Mm.
self-managing.
No, for CI/CD there is only one framework,
Nevertheless, thank you so much for listening, and we hope to speak to you again in another episode of Last Week in IT podcast.
Bye bye.
Thank you very much, and see you soon. And that's it for today. This was Last Week in IT. Thank you for listening, and please join us for the next episode. Follow us on social media, subscribe and comment. If you agree, disagree, or just want to say hello, we are waiting for you. Stay tuned, stay IT.